This is the NES Advantage. It is an arcade-style controller released for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1987. Despite what some may infer, the controller was manufactured by Asciiware and released by Nintendo, not solely manufactured and released by Nintendo. This is one of the first commercially sold fight sticks ever made for home use. Experience the professional feel of real arcade play. Repeat firing power at the touch of a button. Delay the action with the exclusive slow motion control. Holy crap, this thing sounds awesome. Let's crack her open! But before we do, let's get a good look at the back of the box. I find this photo very puzzling. Like, seriously, who holds a joystick like that? Like, I've never seen anyone hold a joystick by just, like, their thumb and their pointer finger. That's just strange. Not to mention the lack of a second finger on the B button. At first I thought this kid was just pointing in some random direction, but after a while I realized the thing at the bottom of the photo is the top of a CRT. Bring the professional feel of a real arcade joystick out of the arcades and into your living room. We'll see about that in a moment. And here it is out of the box. Now, the first thing that you may notice is that it has a very similar design to the actual Nintendo Entertainment System, and you wouldn't be wrong. That's actually what it is based off of. It also happens to be very similar to the actual Nintendo Entertainment System controller, down to the buttons and even the font choices. The board's deck flex is, well, virtually non-existent. And this is likely because of the metal bottom that it has. So overall, I think that Asciiware did a very good job on the case. But what about the controls? Over on the right here, we have a few buttons to play with. One of these is the player switch. You can switch between 1 and 2. Now, you may be asking, well, it's only one board. How could it be player 1 and player 2? And well, the answer to that is, some games weren't co-op, so you could have two ports and plug them into both of the ports on the NES, and then when player 1 dies, an example, Super Mario Bros., and you're playing a two-player game, player 2 will start up as Luigi, and then you would switch the player port over to player 2, and then player 2 can take the NES Advantage. This means you don't have to have, like, two of them or anything. Except, here's the problem. Asciiware didn't include an indicator on which chord is player 1 and which one's player 2. So when I first bought this, I accidentally plugged the player 2 chord into the player 1 port, and I thought that the joystick was broken until I switched the player switch over to player 2, and it started working. And I was like, wow, that's strange. And then after a little bit of thinking, I was like, oh, that's why that happened. So if you ever buy one of these, well, and you think it doesn't work, try that. I think it would have been very easy for them to put something, anything on the chord to indicate which one was player 1 and which one was player 2, but they didn't. So that's kind of some points off in my book for this controller. We also have the standard select and start buttons, you know, just simple buttons, and then we have the slow button. So the slow button doesn't like inject anything into the game file or anything. It doesn't do anything to the game. All it does is rapid fire press the start button to give an appearance of the game moving slowly. It's kind of gimmicky. In fact, I've found that the slow button doesn't really work all the time. In fact, it barely works ever. I think it works in like Super Mario Bros. And I think it might work in Kirby's Adventure, but certain games it just doesn't work really well, you know? It's not pressing start fast enough, you know? It just feels like you're repeatedly pausing and unpausing, which is exactly what it's doing. So ignore the slow button. Just don't use it if you ever buy this joystick. There are some redeemable qualities. You have these very nice turbo buttons. They are incredibly clicky, and I actually quite like that. And they also have these beautiful knobs. This is probably the most well-built part of this entire board. The knobs are super fluent. They don't feel scratchy at all. They're very nice. They're nice and analog. You don't have to choose between like 3 different settings like some other turbo controllers make you do. It's very nice. I like it. They completely nailed this on the head. When they made this joystick, I very much like the turbo. Now, of course, some people don't really like the usage of turbo buttons, and, well, it's kind of an opinion-based thing, you know? You might not like this joystick as much because of the turbo buttons. You might not like it even more because of the turbo buttons, you know? So I think that I'm not really one to decide whether this board should be rated higher thanks to the turbo buttons or lower. So I'm going to kind of leave that part undecided. Of course, we're left with the very big A and B buttons. Now, I find in normal play, these are really far apart. In fact, I feel like it puts strain on my entire wrist as a whole when using them like this. And you can't really, like, use them together like this. So that's kind of a problem I have with them, though it's a problem that I have with many arcade boards, so, you know, I guess it could be an excuse. However, they used membranes, rubber domes, as the buttons instead of switches. Some people kind of like this, all right? So I could see people kind of liking this, but personally, I'm not really a big fan of it. I feel like it's kind of unsatisfying to press, and it's very inconsistent. You know see how it like makes a different sound? It's just, you know, this is kind of one of the lower areas of build quality wise. However, the buttons themselves, they don't feel too bad. I'm more of a concave button kind of guy than a convex, but, you know, whatever floats your boat. So yeah, it's kind of, I'm gonna kind of go with, again, it's kind of an opinion-based thing for the B and the A buttons. Personally, I'm not much of a fan of rubber membrane buttons, but some people are. So, you know, I might actually have to leave this one undecided too. However, there is one aspect of this controller that I really, really don't like. It's the joystick. This is the part where the line on the back of the box of "bring the arcade experience home" comes to scrutiny. Now, most arcade machines back in the 80s used micro switches in their joysticks. A very clicky switch that's very fluent, very tactile, very nice. However, likely as a cost-saving measure, the joystick uses rubber membranes instead of micro switches. This does not feel good at all. The best way to describe this joystick is, well, spongy. Just listen to it. Rather than making a tactile, clicky sound when reaching the edge of the sides of the joystick, it instead makes creaks and loud, weird sounds. This is because they chose to use membranes. The joystick is very easy to move around in the center, requiring almost no force at all. In fact, I find that sometimes it barely even recenters. However, when the joystick nears the edge, it suddenly becomes very stiff. This is a very strange feeling, and I personally don't really like it. One of the most major problems that I noticed, though, was that when you're in a really intense game and you're just moving it all around, say that you got your hand rested here and you move the joystick over with your thumb, the whole thing just lifts up, because this thing's really not that heavy. I mean, it's a little bit heavy, but not like ultra heavy. And it's not very wide either. It's actually really quite slim. So it allows the board to kind of move around when you're just moving around the joystick. And it might not be so much of a problem if the joystick was micro switches, but it takes so much force to move the joystick that you just like end up accidentally doing that, you know what I mean? And I think that is a major problem, a major design flaw in the board. It sucks because this is by far the worst part of this board. And it's the main part. It's why you would buy an NES Advantage in the mid 80s to try to bring that arcade experience home. And I almost don't really feel like that joystick does the arcades justice. But I think, well, we should really just try to put it to the test, shouldn't we? Now, here I am with Super Mario Bros. Now, you may be wondering, why do I have Mario open? Well, today I'm going to demonstrate to you the access lights. Now, they don't really do much other than explain when the turbo's on, but when you do press a button, you'll see that the access light comes right on. And you can see up here, Mario jumps. Now, if I pump this bad boy up and press this button, the light starts flashing, and I can change it in real time with the analog knob. Isn't that just nice? Now, here I am in World 1-2 of Super Mario Bros. Now, I know my way around Super Mario Bros. Pretty well, and I can say sufficiently that this joystick can handle some pretty nice precision movement. However, in order to prove this, I'm actually going to need to demonstrate some stuff to you. So, you can see I'm not really messing it up at all here. Almost did there. It's fine, though. Okay. Come on out, mushroom. There you are. Okay. Alright. So, I'm going to prove to you that I can do the -1 trick. And it's a pretty precise trick, but there you go. Just 3 tries, and I did it. Even with this strange joystick. So, precision, it is possible. You're able to do precise tricks using this joystick. Okay, so here I am with Tetris. So I know Tetris pretty well. I would say that I'm not too bad at it. So I'm gonna just give a small demonstration of my Tetris ability, I guess. There you go. As you can see, I'm not really messing anything major up. The joystick is, while kind of finicky with its really loud buttons and really annoying joystick, it is quite responsive, honestly. And I'm getting clears and stuff, so must be doing something right. Now I want to demonstrate some of the functions to you, like the turbo and slow. I think we'll start with the slow button here. Now, quick epilepsy warning. 3, 2, 1. Now this is what it does. As you can see, it's repeatedly pausing and unpausing. However, if you would happen to notice, of course, I've got like the worst block set ever. Hold on, let me reset here. When I try to make the block turn, sometimes it doesn't always work, and that's because I'm pressing the button sometimes on a frame when it's paused. That's the problem with the slow function. It's that half of the frames that you're playing don't register because you're paused, you know? So you can't move at all. It's very hard to move optimally while in the paused mode. You need to know what you're doing, and I've also discovered that it just straight up stops doing anything when it reaches the bottom like this. I just let it go, and it just didn't do anything. So yeah, The slow function kind of sucks. Just suggestion, don't use it. Now I have finally pulled up Excitebike, and this is where I'm going to explain a possible practical use to the turbo function. Now, in Excitebike, you have two ways to ride. You have the A button and the B button. When you hold the A button, B button. When you hold the B button, your speed goes extremely fast, and you see, if I hold it for too long, I overheat. Now, if I use the A button, I won't overheat. However, I will go significantly slower, and that is part of the strategy that is in Excitebike. As you can see, I'm not going very fast right now compared to what I could be going at these speeds. Doesn't appear very fast, just trust me. And that is where you would get your like temperature re-gauged, I guess, you know what I mean? So you can theoretically, if you're fast enough, you could hold this button forever. However, it doesn't appear that there's enough. So you kind of have to toggle between the A button and the B button to keep your temperature low enough so as you don't overheat. However, there is a solution to this. If I turn on the turbo for the A button and then pump her up like that, and then I press it, as you can see on the temp, I'm not increasing at all. And I'm going faster than I would be normally if I was just holding the A button. Now, eventually, it can't hold itself over anymore, and it will overheat. And this is a small problem with this suggestion for the turbo. However, it does significantly slow down how long it will take for your bike to overheat. So that could be a practical use for it. In my opinion, I think that it's a very good practical use for it. So here's another small demonstration. Well, you can still see it. There you go. Of course, the problem that this poses is when you need to use the A button in cases where like a ramp like this would launch you too far into the mud and you need to slow down. The A button is going at half the speed that it would normally go at. And just like that, I forgot to press the A button because I'm stupid, so ignore that. But theoretically, this could be used to get an extremely good time in Excitebike. And I don't know really the rules to speedrunning this game very well. The use of turbo controllers might be banned, it might not. Not completely sure, honestly. But yeah, that really all this was to do was just to show a use for the turbo. So there you go. If anybody who doesn't really like the turbo, maybe that could be a use for you for the turbo. And with all that, you may be wondering what I think of the NES Advantage. I think that the build quality is, well, excellent. I think that the joystick is very suboptimal. The buttons are, just kind of mediocre. And all of these switches, the switch, I forgot to mention, feels really good to press. The turbo buttons are nice and clicky, so is the slow button. Select and start are also membrane, but it doesn't really matter. You don't use those in normal play. So, what should I say about this? How should I go about this? I'm going to say, if you have an NES and you find one of these for under $30, I think you should pick it up. I think that the joystick is worth it to go back and see what fighting sticks were like a good 40 or so years ago. A little bit less than that, maybe like a 34, whatever. It's all right. I think you should pick it up. Yeah. But, don't pick this up as if you're just gonna like buy an NES to PC port, I would not suggest using this as a PC arcade stick. It's just not good enough for that. The joystick doesn't feel good enough, and the buttons just kind of mediocre. You could buy a very cheap joystick online for a little bit more than what this would probably cost in the secondhand market, but it'd probably go better than this. You know what I mean? So next time you see one of these, think of me. Think about maybe I should pick it up and play it with my NES. Thank you for watching. I hope that that's a conclusive opinion, I guess. And now here is a demonstration of me using this controller.